Our guest today is Stefan Oelrich, Global Head of Pharmaceuticals at Bayer. Stefan is an industry veteran and is bringing about a transformation at the organization at a crucial time. In this conversation, I am joined by my colleague Teena Thacker, and we cover a host of topics ranging from where is innovation headed next, the industry challenges, and how Bayer is preparing for its next leap. It's Monday, the 22nd of December, and I am your host, Vikas Dandekar, editor of Pharmaceuticals at the Economic Times. This is Corner Office Conversations. So thank you so much, Stefan, for joining us for ET Corner Office Conversation. It's great to see you here in India. How do you want to describe your visit?
I've had wonderful conversations with kinds of stakeholders, from customers to policymakers to people that gave me a new view and also to largely confirmatory view of what I thought India would be.
Yeah, so the first and the foremost is the Trump decisions on tariff. How has it impacted your strategies as of now?
It is very clear, and I've said this repeatedly, but and I think I speak also on behalf of our sector, are very favorable to rule-based trade around the world. I think free trade has been the basis for an incredible creation of wealth. So far on pharmaceuticals, an investigation is ongoing when it comes to trade. And we'll have to see what the outcome of that is, given that we have a lot of reciprocal trade between US and Europe. That at least gives us some planning, but the rest has to be seen.
Right, sure. So China is seen as a big innovation hub. In the last 5-6 years, we've seen a rush of deals that large companies have done. How do you see that axis of innovation shifting? How does Bayer prepare for it?
Traditionally, take our presence in India, more than 120 years in India. We're probably one of the oldest brands in your country. And that holds true for many regions in the world. So we're essentially present everywhere. But of course, investments into innovation go more where there's a good reception of those investments and where there's also some level of acceptance and return of those innovations. We've seen this traditionally in Europe. Europe was the pharmacy of the world for a long time. Then it shifted more towards the US. Today we have more balance between a number of regions, which includes China.
Right. You also have the presidentship of the European Association, and you've been speaking about how we need to do the reset because of the pressures that the European innovation sector has actually been feeling from either US or from China. What will be your roadmap to really get the European research back?
So if you allow, I would like to characterize it with 3 simple words. So what we need to do, we need to accelerate in Europe. We need to attract and we need to have better access. And that's essentially sums up my agenda in this presidency. So Europe needs to be attractive for investment. And that is investment both in capital, but also in terms of people. Europe needs to be faster in its approval, faster in reducing bureaucracy, in creating better regulation, and ultimately giving a strong access to all citizens. I mean, one of the most important tasks that we have as innovators is that innovation actually also translates into demand. And so a demand is only then created in a health system where people have actually access to that innovation. So these 3 combined should make Europe competitive with any region in the world.
Right. So one of the statements that you made in one of your posts is about breakthroughs require courage, ambition, and crucially the right environment. What will be your prescription for that? I mean, is it not right at the present moment?
Actually, the time has never been better for breakthrough than today in our industry, because the increase in knowledge around biology combined with digital advancements and also in chemistry has never been better than today. Actually, the knowledge growth in our sector is almost second to none. And that incredible push in knowledge growth translates ultimately into the opportunity to create products and ultimately also make this industry very attractive to invest in. In order to get there, you need to be courageous because you never know if that knowledge ultimately translates into a successful medicine. And so you need to get off the beaten path and really take that innovation and dare to take it to the next level. And our industry has been traditionally very good at that. And when you look at the amount of approvals that we're getting as an industry over the past few years, it has actually increased. So you see a higher number of output from our industry, improving outcomes in patients.
We just talked about innovation, and the biggest and the recent innovation has been Mounjaro and Ozempic, which are making big bucks and also trending. Any plans to get into the weight loss segment?
Well, we're traditionally very strong in the cardiovascular and metabolics area. So all of these things are connected. So we don't have a pipeline project today in obesity, but we target other of these inflammatory processes, for example, protecting kidney, protecting the heart. And all of these come together. So reducing weight is one important factor to tackle some of this metabolic syndrome, but it's not the only one. Also in research and development, it's like in a good sports game, you don't want all the kids on one ball, but you want to be distributed along the field to actually score the most goals.
So again, coming back to the flight of investments that we see from Europe to US because of the threats that Trump has actually been giving, that we want the manufacturing back and creation of jobs. On the other side, you see China becoming the hub of innovation because of the way the clinical development is happening at a very fast clip. How do you see Bayer placed in this situation? Do you think that it will be able to carry its very rich heritage of research and that foundation will stay intact?
Actually, like many of our peers, we're really well positioned for this because we're present in all these geographies, and we're present both within in clinical research, very often also basic research, and typically also manufacturing in all of these areas. So this per se is nothing that worries me. I'm more concerned when we look at trade barriers because I think ultimately they increase cost and someone needs to pay the price for that. And that's why free trade is so important. But when it comes to some of the asks on a fair distribution of reward for innovation, I think some of these asks are fair.
So my larger point is, do you think in the future, China will probably become a very big, heavy biotech innovation hub? Because those threats have been felt in the US also. The kind of deals that we have actually seen, the Hengrui, all the large deals coming from the licensing opportunities that have been thrown up.
If we look at the past as a good proxy for what may be the future, in pharmaceuticals so far, innovation has always been something that was actually shared globally. When a new medicine was invented and clinically proven to be effective, then typically we would try out this new medicine in different ethnicities around the world and then also make it available around the world. And I think that holds true for all regions, including China. And I would be surprised if something groundbreaking was discovered in China and then other parts in the world would not want to have access to that.
I want to talk about your blockbuster clot-reducing drug, Xarelto, which faced stiff generic competition, notably in Europe and Canada, and it has seen sales crumbling. So, moreover, I think the decline was faster than expected. So what are the new product launches in the pipeline that could help cope up with the hit?
So the genericization of Xarelto is no surprise to us, because don't forget, at the end of our exclusivity, we dedicate the inventions that we make to the public so that this can be actually then purchased at very low prices. We've been quite successful at actually replacing the lost sales of our products that have lost exclusivity. And not everyone was expecting that. And this year alone, you may see that we've upped our guidance where we had initially intended to see a decline of our sales between -4% and -2%. We've now increased the guidance to actually some growth. And that is quite remarkable when you have negative sales of more than $1 billion in one sales, given the size of our overall pharmaceutical business, that we were not only able to compensate for that, but even will by end of year show some level of growth. So to your question, that comes, of course, from the newly launched products. So we're seeing very strong growth coming from a number of products that we have introduced. We've currently either in launch or preparing to launch a number of blockbuster opportunity products like we've never had in such a density, products such as darolutamide to treat prostate cancer, product like finerenone to treat diabetic kidney disease, and now also approved in some countries to treat a very difficult to treat form of heart failure. So these two alone would be generating sales of more than $2.5 billion this year. I'm happy to say, and I've also reported to the capital markets, that we will be exceeding that number in a significant way. We've launched a new form of our market-leading product in back of the eye, retinal eye disease. Aflibercept is the drug name, in an 8 milligram version that also contributes to that. And we're gearing up to launch a new non-hormonal option for women that suffer from menopausal symptoms like hot flashes or sleep disorder. And by end of year, we expect some data readout of a novel anticoagulant called asundexian, where we had a failed study 2 years ago, which is something that happens. But let me tell you, people like to remind me of the failed study. Out of the last 10, 9 were successful. And when you expect 60% success rate in your phase 3, then I'm actually quite happy with the hit rate that we're seeing. So all in all, when you look at our total business, it's small growth. But if you discount the effect of Xarelto, we really expect to see growth in the coming years. And one thing that very often remains unnoticed in this growth story is that we have a very stable backbone business, which even has elements of strong growth, like radiology, where we are world leaders in contrast media and injectors, which this year shows almost 10% growth in the first half. We're still the leading company in women's healthcare, mostly with long-acting contraceptives, but also short-acting contraceptives, where we've also seen growth around the world this year. So it's a good year for us.
So in one of the statements also you mentioned we may no longer be in the top 5, but in the business, size is not the decisive factor. Innovation is. A lot of innovation is changing. It's a transformational period that we are seeing, the shift that we have seen in ADCs, in multispecific antibodies, and people are now talking a lot about oligonucleotides, cell and gene therapy. You have been doing so much of work. How do you characterize the change? How do you think Bayer is going to be at the top of the heap?
So I think I may have said that this is an industry where size alone is not the decisive factor. When you have other sectors that are heavily invested into production, for example, then this equation may be different than in ours. So I think we're seeing, I said it before, unprecedented advances in science, and they're translating into products that people couldn't even dream about before. And in Bayer, we have a number of potential new medicines in our pipeline that also give me very often goosebumps in terms of what is possible. You mentioned cell and gene, which so far haven't really broken through as a therapeutic modality. By the way, the same was true for multi-specific antibodies, which for a long time were really difficult to see whether they would break through, and now they're breaking through a number of indications. So I expect the same to happen in cell and gene therapy, because we just know that at some point the body ceases to function in many people, be it age-related or for some other reasons, and then to have the ability to repair damaged or non-functional cells is just too promising to not pursue. And if you lose sight because your photoreceptor cells have ceased to function, and you could replace them and make people see again, then that is almost a biblical promise that you make. And I think we have the potential to get there. Will we succeed? Again, I don't know. But that's the part of courage that I was insinuating before. And that's what we're trying. And certain forms of blindness are an area, replacing dopamine-producing neurons to reverse the course of Parkinson is another one, where we're pretty advanced, I would say, in terms of our clinical efforts, with 2 advanced clinical trials in cell and gene therapy. We already know today that you can treat monogenic diseases by adding the broken gene to the genome. And it's almost like repairing a broken tire. And if you use in vivo gene editing, you can switch the tire. And if you add the right gene into the cell, it's almost like adding a tire to the car that even though the broken tire may still be there, like on a truck, and they always have this axle where they have additional tires. So we can do a lot of things in theory. We now need to break through in translating this into the practice. And I think we're one of the leading companies in terms of number of clinical projects that we have, be it in monogenic diseases, be it in pathway diseases like Parkinson's, or also a very severe form of heart failure where we're doing gene therapy to improve the contractility of the heart muscle, where people today are waiting for a transplant. We may give them a new lease on life by making the heart work much, much longer than today is possible. So those are things that give me personally goosebumps of what science can actually make happen.
So, Stefan, do you still expect your first cell and gene therapy to hit the market by the end of this decade?
Absolutely, yes. That's our goal. It's an ambitious goal. And we're in an industry where success does not come easy. We face lots of risks in terms of failure in our clinical trials, so I cannot predict whether we will be successful with that. But the challenge is out there. We would love to have this by the end of the decade because patients are waiting for it. I get so many phone calls from patients that call me directly and say, can I get into the trials? My disease is progressing. This is the only hope that I have to lead a normal life and to extend my life. And I can see it in your face now that this gets under your skin as well. Like it gets under mine every time I have these conversations. When you sit with a Parkinson patient next to you, and right during the discussion that you have with the patient, this patient becomes dyskinetic and starts to make movements that none of us normally would make because our dopamine is regulated like it should be, while that patient's dopamine is not regulated like it should be. You immediately say like, wow, we need to be faster. We need to bring solutions to these individuals that suffer from this. And I think there's no one around this table that doesn't know someone who suffers from this type of disease. So it's not something ultra rare. It's something that's around us. And making a difference in those patients' lives, that's what we in our industry and also I personally get out of bed for in the morning.
Stefan, my next question is, how affordable will these products be for markets like India? Or will you probably launch only in those high-priced markets?
So I feel very, very strongly about this because this question, obviously, you're not the first one to ask. And it's a question that has kept us busy. And we have decided a few years back after I joined that we want to have a much stronger tiered pricing approach in the world. Pricing should also be a function of affordability. That being said, we also need a return on the investment of the risks that we take for research and development. But I think these two can be combined. And then, of course, there's a number of voluntary schemes that we take to also give access to the people that have no access at all to innovative medicines. By the way, not just in low and middle income countries, but even in high income countries, we facilitate broadly access because otherwise, we would be talking out of both sides of our mouth.
Great. So a couple of India questions. We've just seen a couple of days ago, again, a big IP battle between an Indian company and a Swiss company. But your views about how you want to see this constant fights on intellectual property, do you think it's patient-friendly? Do you think generics will make it affordable?
Well, first of all, I'm not going to comment on other companies' matters on principle, but let me tell you that when I look at what India has done over the last few years, there has been a clear improvement on respect of intellectual property. And I think that's a sign of India advancing. And wherever intellectual property is respected, it typically goes hand in hand with economic development. And so I feel like India is going in the right direction. In terms of intellectual property protection. I, for one, am not aware that we've had any issues on that side, and individual cases may vary, but I'm not commenting on other companies.
Right. About your India outlook, how do you want to see the country and Bayer's positioning in India?
So first of all, we're very happy with how India is developing for us. We're seeing good success with recent introductions, and I think it has to do with really having created almost a tailor-made portfolio for the needs of India with a strong focus on non-communicable diseases and our strong leadership in cardiovascular. So we hope to enjoy that type of uptake and continued growth until we lose our exclusivity and dedicate then our innovation to the Indian public. And then generic companies will take over. India is projected to be one of the fastest growing economies in the world, and it's going to increase the middle class, also the size of people having access to innovation. And all I can hope for is that we can actually accelerate there also India is investing today below the OECD average in health. And investment in health is always a proxy also for wealth of a society. And so I applaud again the government's intent to increase that. And so I'm positively optimistic about where this is headed. And I mean, you have a long history since your independence, and I see that over the last few years, progress is accelerating. So that's a really good thing.
So you have collaborated with Dr. Reddy's and Sun Pharma. Will we see more such partnerships in India? And is there anything in the pipeline?
So first of all, we're extremely pleased with those partnerships. And I think it comes to show that also local companies and multinationals can very successfully work together. So by the way, we have some similar type of arrangements also in other geographies in Europe, for example, where it's not uncommon to give out semi-exclusive licenses for some of our products. And it has come to show that for India, that's actually a way to reach out to more doctors, to reach out to more patients and actually improve access around the country. And I'm very happy that Dr. Reddy and Sun are our partners. So as we introduce new medicines into India, we will always consider this type of partnership.
So Bayer has significantly reduced its headcount this year. Will we see more people going?
So headcount is something that typically flexes up and down. In India, we've been increasing our headcount. And in other parts of the world, we've been increasing our headcount. So to me, it's always a function that responds to the needs of the business. We've decreasing headcount, for example, in sales and pharmaceuticals in Europe because our sales are shrinking in Europe. So that's something that breathes with the business. And when you look at our pharmaceutical business, I would expect that we will continue to have these changes, positive and sometimes also negative, as we move forward. We should be flexible and we should respond to the needs of the market.
So one more question on the overall, the movements, the industry shape that is actually being taken. We've seen like a wave of new companies who have been more agile and who have been able to invent new drugs. The stack has actually been toppled. Of course, obesity, the revolution that we have seen. On the other hand, we see centuries-old companies which have actually felt the pressure. And again, cost burdens have been increasing. Again, we see small companies really coming up with real breakthrough ideas. In all of this, some of these large companies have actually felt the pressure. Do you think it will be able to come back with the same efficiency plans and become more agile?
I love that question because it brings me to the third priority for us this year, which is leveraging our own new operational system. As we were revamping our whole R&D model in Bayer and become much less German-centric than we had traditionally been, we did a number of acquisitions in the US and also in Europe. One of the organizational principles that we put in place was that we wanted to manage them as if they were continuing as biotechs. And we operate them as if they were independent biotechs, but they buy services from us instead of building services that we already have. But they remain independent in terms of how they operate and how they pay their people, how their IT system works. And my thought at the time was, instead of them becoming like us, we should more become like them. So how do we become like them? This is now the challenge of a more than 150-year-old company. And you will be surprised. We're working on exactly that to transform ourselves into that. Typically, what makes a small company agile is they pursue much fewer priorities and they are much more outcome focused than are large companies. And the idea is relatively simple. Can you actually move away from a functional organization into a more outcome-based organization? Now we decide more in an end-to-end fashion our products, and we've created speedboats like biotechs inside the company, which we call the product teams. And we do this in R&D as we do it in our commercial stage products. And before, functions had budgets and that they would allocate those budgets to what they thought were the highest priorities. We now have sort of like taken away that liberty of spend and given it to the projects. And now the projects can source themselves very dynamically from the functions. So we've sort of like flattened our hierarchies by moving the money in a very different way and also giving that system change to our people. The same we're doing, by the way, in the countries. If you take a country like India, we were much more traditionally focused in the past in so-called business units. And these business units had their budgets and they were following in their silos how to best optimize the silo. We've dissolved these silos and they now work much more dynamically. They say, where do we have our biggest growth opportunities? Let's move resources from left to right. And when you have an outcome-based system, ownership has a totally different meaning. So what we've tried to do is really a system change. We run these product units like if it was a portfolio in a venture fund. Right. So I give them a clear target. In the next 3 years, I expect these outcomes. And against that, you get the following framing in terms of money that you can spend and invest. If you don't get to the outcomes, I will change your framing. So that gives a totally different accountability to the people that sit in these end-to-end teams. And maybe, you never know, it's the hen and the egg. Maybe this is also one of the reasons why we're performing so well.
Wonderful talking to you. Thank you so much for joining us for this show.
Thank you.
That was Stefan Oelrich of Bayer, and he was very candid on issues that needed clear responses. How companies are grappling with research on new drugs, Europe's own challenges, and where India stands for Bayer. This episode was produced by Vinay Joshi, sound designed by Amrit Reji. A new episode of Corner Office Conversation drops on Mondays, wherever you get your podcasts. This is your host Vikas Dandekar signing off. Thank you.